Hello chess friends and welcome to Azarov Chess channel and welcome back to the Tata Steel Rapid and Blitz Chess Tournament in 2024. So yesterday the Rapid section finished where Magnus Carlsen simply destroyed them all. Out of the 9 rounds of Rapid Chess, Magnus gained 7.5 points, which was really crazy. In one moment, Magnus had 6 consecutive wins, which was really an immortal and epic performance again by Magnus Carlsen, and he is now of course the deserved winner of the Rapid tournament of Tata Steel Chess. So today the Blitz section started where again in one moment Magnus simply took off, was unstoppable. We have to also mention he lost one game with the white pieces against Arjun Erigaisi because of a huge opening mistake, but otherwise again almost a perfect performance again by Magnus Carlsen. Out of the first 9 rounds, again tomorrow we'll see another 9 rounds. Out of the first 9 rounds, Magnus gained now 6.5 points and is now the leader of this top event. The follower is Mrabashmo Pragnanda, also I think a great result for Prague. He gained respectively 6 points so far, and also Daniil Dubov is there, and also I would say Arjun Erigaisi is also very interesting in the Blitz section because, as I mentioned, he had a great win against Magnus Carlsen and can maybe spice up tomorrow the event and try to do something more in the Tata Steel Blitz section. So we're starting now the Blitz section with an amazing game here by Magnus Carlsen against Nihal Sarin. The tempo of this game is 3 minutes on the clock plus 2 seconds increment per move, and here I would say Magnus plays simply like a machine, like the Stockfish engine, without inaccuracies, mistakes, or blunders. He's always playing here the first or second choice by top engines, which is really crazy. 100% here by Magnus Carlsen. Put your seatbelts on and enjoy in an epic game here by Magnus, the big Magnus Carlsen. So with the white pieces here, Magnus opened with the move d4, knight to f6 by Nihal Sarin, c4, e6, knight to f3, the counter ninja Indian setup here by white, not allowing to get pinned after potential knight to c3, d5, French position into the queen's gambit decline, and now after move g3, we have now the Catalan structure here by Magnus Carlsen, trying to do something, trying to somehow play a more asymmetrical game where the Catalan is of course much sharper than the standard, maybe knight to c3, where it would lead I think into a more positional battle. g3 here by Magnus, the sharp Catalan opening, bishop to b4, Magnus covers, Nihal castles, and now Magnus simply develops the piece. We have now b6 with the preparation here to develop the light square bishop maybe on the square a6, or to place it here on b7 to compete against this dangerous bishop on g2. Magnus also secures the king, and here Nihal simply competes finally on this diagonal. We have now b3 by Magnus, simply fixing everything here in the center of the board. Knight from b to d7, and now bishop to b2. Magnus plays in sort of a double fianchetto way. Both of those bishops are very dangerous, crossing all over the board. Nihal develops here the rook, improves simply the position, is trying to do something here on the e file. Magnus also does the same, is trying to do something on the c file. We have now bishop to f8. Now good move I would say here by Nihal Sarin, because you don't want to give up probably your bishop for a knight now in the early stage of the game, and the bishop is well placed. Then maybe we can try g6, bishop to g7, and also play in sort of a double fianchetto style, trying of course somehow to compete also against this dangerous bishop on b2. But now comes I think the first critical moment of this game. Here Magnus Carlsen releases the pressure in the center by trading off the pawns on d5, and Nihal Sarin plays a theoretical novelty with bishop to d5, which is in the beginning making perfect sense because there is simply no way that white will push the pawn on e4. Usually you can take with the center in the center of the board with a minor piece if there's simply no counterplay by your opponent with any pawns against this minor piece, and so far it's not. But here after move rook to e1, you see in the next move this bishop will be kicked away from d5 anyway. Maybe a better choice here for Nihal Sarin was to take with the pawn, also not to take with the knight, because with the knight you have the same problem of e4. Again, the piece would be then kicked away with a great tempo by white. So better is here to take with the pawn. Then after something like knight to e5, you can also play aggressively here with the black pieces in the center of the board, and then after something like d takes e5, Bxc5, you would have this so-called hanging pawn structure. From black's perspective, you have this mobile pawn structure in the center of the board, where the game is really complicated, I would say, for both sides. White has an attack against this pawn, but black has a certain flexibility to push the pawns and create maybe some madness in the center of the board. After bishop to d5 that Nihal played, Magnus of course says, okay, maybe I cannot play e4 immediately, but I can prepare it. And now the game becomes a little bit unpleasant here for Nihal Sarin. c5, he's trying to break in the center, but of course, first of all, the counterplay by Magnus, bishop to b7, and now e5. Magnus advances the pawn, gain an extra tempo, gate of course also the space advantage, and now the king knight gets also deflected from the defense of black's king. Magnus improves now the position of the knight and hits simply the main strategic disadvantage in black's position, the weak d6 square. Really unpleasant game now for Nihal Sarin. We have now rook to c8 and now knight from f to d2. Great follow-up here by Magnus, because in some lines, if you move the knight somewhere, maybe let's see this option, if you move, then there is a possibility maybe of knight to f6 and you pick up the bishop. So the knight on d5 is now a little bit stuck, but knight to d2 is really a great move, because Magnus is preparing now to hop with one of these knights on the beautiful d6 square and simply fix the position around this very dangerous square. So Nihal Sarin is preventing that by playing the move b5. Magnus simply plays knight to d6 anyway. He occupies immediately the square, bishop to d6, e takes d6, and the issue is now, okay, maybe you have now an isolated pawn on d6, which could be maybe a long-term weakness. Actually, it is very hard for black to attack this pawn. Nihal didn't play queen to b6 because it doesn't make sense anyway. Look at this. Even if you play queen to b6, then d takes c5, rook to c5, we trade off the rooks, and then knight to e4 will happen. We simply attack the queen, protect the pawn. When the queen stabs back, queen to g4 is going to happen, and there is now huge threat here around the square g7. So probably you will be tactically destroyed here from black's perspective. So it's not working. So here after e takes d6, the only way maybe to do something is to play c takes d4, then after bishop to d4 to trade off the rooks, and then to play aggressively with e5. Maybe this was a final chance now for Nihal Sarin to get back into the game. But after e takes d6, he played now a dubious c4. Magnus takes, b takes c4, knight to c4. Magnus took a pawn, protects now the d6 pawn. D4 pawn is okay, maybe doubled, but it doesn't matter. Here Magnus continues the game with the bishop pair, which is crossing again all over the board, and finally I think the game becomes a one-way ticket, but in white's favor. Knight to b6, Nihal is battling, Magnus simply attacks the bishop. Nihal retreats here and occupies this diagonal, but here the bishop is not doing again so much. You are maybe crossing here as diagonal, but you're aiming into air. Maybe it was also a little bit better to stay on this diagonal to compete against the bishop on g2. But okay, after bishop to a6, Magnus plays bishop to a3, connects now the bishop to the pawn on d6, queen to d7, and now bishop to c5. And here Magnus controls the whole board, I would say now. Both of these pawns are protected now. The bishop on c5 is sort of, I would say, bishop slash pawn. It's a bishop pawn, where the bishop is also taking a function of a pawn that is a part of the pawn chain here. Great move. Now the position is fixed near here. The knight will eventually come into the game. This bishop is good anyway. Rooks are on I would say normal files where they're supposed to be, so the queen can be always included into the game. So perfect setup here, right? Magnus Carlsen, h6 h3, rook to d8, queen to d2, connecting now the rooks. Nihal is trying to battle, and now a centralizing move here by the bishop. Nihal attacks it, Magnus retreats, but of course keeps also a good score for the king, where the king is now improved on g2, and basically, if you watch now the position of all of the pieces by Magnus Carlsen, of the minor pieces, of the rooks, of the queen, of the king, almost the pieces are on optimal scores. You cannot really find even better scores on the board for all of the pieces. So great setup by Magnus Carlsen. Queen to d7, h4, bishop to b5, bishop to a3, knight to c4. Now we have a trade of knights, and now Magnus builds a battery simply on the c file. Knight to f6, rook from e to c1, bishop to d5, bishop takes d5, and now Nihal Sarin makes another mistake in the game. He plays now rook to c2, which is not good. Because you lose now the battle on the c file. A better choice was to play knight to d5, and you at least competing against the battery that Magnus Carlsen created. Maybe then after something like king to g1, you can play a6. The position is, of course, much better for white, but in this other scenario that Nihal Sarin played, you have to now lose the battle on the c file, and there's nothing that can be done. Okay, you can play knight to d5, but now Magnus goes for a fully endgame stage, which is, I think, a huge choice. Many of us would try to do something else, but Magnus realized that this pawn on d6 is simply too powerful. Here, after queen to c6, Nihal traded off. We have now the move f6, bishop to c5, hitting now this pawn, rook to d7, rook to a6, attacking now this pawn anyway, knight to b6 here by Nihal Sarin, but now a great move again by Magnus, a4, with the preparation to play a5 and kick finally this knight away from this active square. King to f7, we have now this idea, knight to c4, and now simple improvement of the king. Great moves again by Magnus Carlsen. We are now in the fully endgame stage, and the king is supposed to be really active in this stage of the endgame, because there's simply no piece that could now endanger the king on f3. So perfect move again here by Magnus. e5 d5, passing through. All of these are double pawns. On the d file, still they're restricting the knight's ability to play. You cannot hop with your knight maybe here, you cannot hop here. Really strange position for the knight. The knight is a little bit misplaced, really out of game. f5, the only move here by Nihal Sarin to somehow also keep white's king out of the game, not allowing to play king to g4 or king to e4. We have now rook takes a7, rook takes a7, bishop to a7, and it seems so that Nihal is maybe holding the position after move knight to a5, because still these are double pawns, but Magnus calculated everything in a good way. Really like a machine here. Let's see now also the option if Nihal would have taken this pawn on d6. This move doesn't make sense, because then you play a6 and the position is simply too stretched for the knight. And you can maybe try, I don't know, something like this, but bishop to c5, and then we push the pawn. In one moment black will have to give up the knight for a pawn, and then with up a piece, obviously game over here for black. So that's why Nihal had to play knight to a5. It seems so that he could hold maybe this position, but now Magnus found a beautiful follow-up with the move d7, and this is this beautiful endgame technique by Magnus Carlsen. He's realizing that black cannot play king to e7. Even if you do that, then you get here d8 the promotion, and then bishop to b6. The king gets decoyed onto the dark square, and this should be again game over here for black. Really amazing technique with the move d7, knight to b7, and all of this is in faster time formats. We have to mention it again, because this is really blitz format, and Magnus sees this best stockfish lines here. Incredible performance by Magnus. After knight to b7, bishop to c5, restricting now the king's ability to get here on e7. You cannot pick up the piece because there will be a promotion. Again, a brilliant move here by Magnus. g6, now he gets the king closer. Bishop to f8, sort of a Zugzwang move, forcing a reaction. Now he goes to b4. The bishop is not even attacked now anymore. c5, the king is restricted, cannot have access to the pawn on d7, cannot then of course also get to d8. So it's obviously game over here for Nihal Sarin. He's trying to battle, but now Magnus simply gets the king closer. Nihal is trying somehow to do something here. We have now an attack against the knight. Bishop to d2, great move, controlling also the e3 square, king to e5, and now e3. All of these are double pawns. Again, I'm pointing out they're restricting again the knight's ability to play. You cannot do anything. You cannot pick up, of course, the piece, because you get simply here a promotion. So let's go back. After here, the move d6 here by Magnus Carlsen, e3 by Nihal Sarin, but Magnus simply took bishop to e3, king to d5. Here, Nihal Sarin is hoping maybe that Magnus plays something like this, then he would probably sacrifice the knight, and then we pick up the pawn, which would be, of course, a thematic draw. But after king to d5, Magnus played now the calm bishop to f4, and in this particular position, Nihal Sarin resigned. So again, this idea is not working. If he tries to do something like this, okay, maybe you can pick up, of course, the bishop, but this pawn will be promoted. Obviously, game over for Nihal Sarin. So great game by Magnus again in a 3+2 game, playing such precise chess. Incredible performance. As we mentioned, Magnus is in the lead. Let's see again the current standings with 6.5 points. Great performance again. And what's the craziest part? Look at this. Magnus has a great performance, and he lost also rating points. This is unbelievable because his rating is close to 2900. Again, I'm not sure what to say about Magnus Carlsen anymore. This is very epic how he's playing again chess in this Tata Steel Rapid and Blitz chess tournament in 2024. So okay, if you want to see some other brilliant Magnus Carlsen's games from this event, check out our coverage. Here are some links of some games that we have analyzed before, and if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.